So Job chapter 1 starts out where I think a lot of people might find themselves. There was a man, this is in verse 1. There's a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, turning away from evil. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, very many servants. That man was the greatest of all the men of the East. And really, the more you look at Job, the more you look at why he was great. I mean, he was great because of his faith. He was great because of how he responded to tragedy. He was great in the way in which God blessed him. He had great wealth. He had great possessions. He could look out and say, God has really blessed me. I mean, he could have looked out and say, look what I've accomplished. Look at what I've done because of my ability and strength and wisdom and my business acumen. I've done all these things and I've accomplished all these things. Instead, he didn't do that. He looked at what God had given him. In fact, he knew that God had given him. He said, God has given. And so we'll even see in particular the verse where he says that very thing. He's great in a lot of ways. And it even says his sons used to go and hold a feast in verse 4 in the house of each one of on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. In the days of feasting had completed their cycle, Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This Job did continually. A lot of what's going on in that first portion of Job is it's just talking about what kind of man he was. The Bible says, or he's referred to as blameless and upright. Doesn't mean he was sinless. It meant the integrity in his heart was so high. His motives were the right motives. The things he wanted to do and the reasons he did them were the right kind of reasons and the right kind of motives. And one of the things that the scripture talks about against a lot of us, against a lot of people, is sometimes we have the right statement, but our motives are different, right? We have the right desire, but our motives inside are crooked. It's what we usually refer to as passive aggressive, right? We want to come across looking one way, but in our hearts we're saying something differently and trying to make a point otherwise. And I got to be honest, one of the areas in which I thought about this, even for us, is I know in October every year, it's going to sound silly, but this is something. In October every year, and I don't know who consecrated this day, but it's like across I don't know if it's just a city thing or it's nationwide, but it's like Pastor Appreciation Month, and every September, the pastoral staff, we get sheets and we're asked these questions. What's your favorite candy bar? Somebody put on there, what's your favorite body lotion? And I was like, I dare one of my staff members to answer that question. A couple of them did. But it's interesting because then in October, the church and the Sunday school, and they come together, and I tell you, it's cool. I mean, the staff really appreciates that. But if I start feeling like in my heart I'm expecting that, or if I see in the staff a competition for who's going to get what, I'll end it. I just don't ever I want to make sure that our motives are right, and that includes my own. And here the guy named Job, he's got God saying his motives are right, his heart is right, the guy's blameless, and he's upright. He turns away from evil. Like 3 different ways to establish this guy's got integrity. And then it talks about his kids. 7 sons, 3 daughters. In fact, the kids got along so much that they would plan these week-long feasts, and they would take turns at whose house it would be, and they would invite their sisters, and they would have great food and wine, just anticipating great excitement and joy. And then after these feasts, Job was so strong in his trust and faith and love in God, and he was so concerned about his kids in the right way that after the week would be over or the feast would be over, then Job would go, and it says he would consecrate them. He would sacrifice on their behalf. So he saw himself as the priest to that family, and he would lead that family, and he would love that family, even offering sacrifices for this family, showing God, okay, God, if they've done anything in their hearts, even privately, God, if they've done something inside that they don't even have said out loud, or the people haven't haven't heard or no one's overheard, or there's no statement or insecurity, if they've not made these passive-aggressive statements, if they've not shown cynicism in their hearts, if they've not come out, but it's in their heart and they've got these secret sins, then God, I want you to forgive them, Lord. I want you to forgive them, God. Please forgive them. So Job put himself between them and God. That's what a man does, by the way. That's what a dad does. That's what a husband does. God, I want you to put me between them. As the priest of my family and the priest of my home, I want to pray for them, ask your forgiveness for them. And Job was concerned not even for their actions as much as for their hearts. God, I want to pray for their heart. That's the kind of man Job was. That he loved his family so much. They prayed for him, in fact, it even says continually, right? At the end of verse 5, this Job did continually. He was constantly doing this, constantly going to God and praying and praying and praying. And look at how he says, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. He's not even sure. But God, if it's the case that one of my sons or daughters have sinned, even secretly and privately in their heart, God, forgive them. I mean, you got to be honest. Some of us would go to God and just say, God, I just want to thank you for what you've given me. I just want to thank you that you've blessed me all this much, and that you've given me these kids, and that you've given me this land, and you've given me this possessions, and you've given me 3,000 cattle that I'm going to figure out what to do with, right? He goes and says, God, please protect my kids. Please forgive them. It even says that he would rise up. Look at that in verse 5. When the days of feasting had completed their cycle, Job would send and consecrate them, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings. I'll tell you what I like about that. If you've been here on our Wednesday nights and you've been taking part in our study through Leviticus, the burnt offerings were the ones to cover the guilt of sin in general. So he's just offering these offerings going, whatever they've done. I mean, he didn't have to even know about a specific sin. Verse 6, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Those are the angels. That's what it's referring to as the angels. There was a day when the sons of God, the angels, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Now listen, in the Hebrew here, here's something interesting. It doesn't just say Satan, it says the Satan. The angels came to appear before God, and the Satan came among us. Let me tell you what that means. He's not just saying that the devil came, or this guy who we refer to as Satan as if his name is Satan. He's saying the Satan. It's a title. The one, his job, his role, his life, his purpose. When he would go before God, his only responsibility was as the Satan, which is the accuser. He was the accuser. He was the attorney arguing against whoever he could. He was the one throwing all the junk in front of God as if to say, just so you know, I'm a tattletale on these people, and I've been roaming around. It even says, he asked him, Lord said to Satan in verse 7, from where do you come? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from roaming around on the earth and walking around on it. You know what he's trying to do? He's trying to find people that he can bring before God and say, that person doesn't love you. That person is nice to your face, but then when you're gone, he's running you down the ground. He's throwing you under the bus. You show up, God, and he'll give you good stuff. But when you're gone, God, and it's not around all the church folk, God, you know what he's doing? He's running his mouth. He's using foul language. He's doing the kind of things that you would never want to hear one of your people doing. He's acting like somebody who don't know you at all. I just want you to know, God, because I want this guy to get in trouble. And Satan's got a couple goals. One, to get you in trouble, but two, to try to hurt God and say that person doesn't really love you. And listen, we all know somebody who acts like Jesus on Sunday and the devil the rest of the week. And if it doesn't drive you nuts, it drives me nuts, especially on the days that I'm the one acting like that. The Satan's job is just to say, I'm going to accuse you. I'm going to make sure God knows what you're up to. And I'm going to throw it in your face. And whatever I've got to do to make sure that you constantly doubt God's love, and whatever I can do to make sure you constantly question God's motives, that's what the devil does. Roaming around, the New Testament says, like a lion trying to figure out who he can devour. He's just looking, hiding, waiting for you to do something that he can just throw in your face and say, ha, I knew you weren't really a believer. I knew you didn't really think the stuff about God, because if you did, you'd have a transformation that'd be consistent. And this was the same question I asked last week. With so many people who claim that God has a transforming power, why is there so little evidence of it? I mean, I know we can get cleaned up on Sunday and come walking in here. Who cares? I mean, if more energy and thought goes into how you dress on a Sunday than how you live the rest of the week, then what are we doing? Don't walk out and scream about the transforming power of God if you're going to act like you've never known him. So he's walking around trying to find somebody. The Lord said in verse 8, have you considered my servant Job? I mean, how would you like to be referred to like that? He didn't just say, what about Job, this guy over here? He didn't just say, what about this guy that's got a lot? I mean, he's wealthy, big family, they all get along. He said, have you considered my servant Job? I mean, what do you have to do to be like that? I mean, is this a moment of excitement where you can say, I believe God sees me that way? Or is this a moment of conviction where you're saying, man, I know I'm not the one that God looks down at. I mean, where are you when you see this verse? Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. I mean, 3 different ways to explain how this guy is. He's blameless. His motives, his integrity, really high. He's upright. He acts in such a way that honors me consistently. And he turns from evil. When evil presents itself, he turns and walks the other way. 3 different ways to say, this is who this guy Job is. Is this who you are? Verse 9, then Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? I mean, that had to be just a statement that the devil's throwing out just to grab God's ear. Well, of course he loves you. I mean, why shouldn't he? Of course he loves you, God. I mean, you've given him everything. My goodness, put the silver spoon down. I mean, the guy's got what he asked for. He's got more than he needs. He's got 3,000 camels, God. All right? Like, I'm sticking on that one, y'all, if you haven't noticed. 3,000 camels, really? Dude, share, right? So he says, does he love you for nothing? Verse 10, have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. I like how the devil knows where the possession came from. I like how the devil knows where the wealth and growth and prosperity came from. I like how the devil understands this. Isn't it something when we have to learn a lesson from the devil about how God is? Because how many of us think that we have and own and earned what we've got? Why do we as Christians still get this so wrong? And the proof that we as Christians get this so wrong, thinking that it's our possessions that we've earned because of our hard work and integrity, the proof of it is the fact that we have a governmental welfare system that government's having to do what the church can't. And I mean, from that one verse in that one chapter in the book of Job, we should have learned a lesson from the devil about God. I mean, the devil even says, you have protected him. You put a hedge of protection around him. You have blessed him. You've blessed the work of his hands, God. I mean, Job could easily say, I'm so great and I'm so smart and I'm so experienced and educated. But instead, God, we know, God, this is me and you talking here. We know that you're the one that gave him all this. We know that you're the one that provided and blessed and then protected so that he couldn't lose it. You even gave him 10 kids that get along. Right there is a miracle in itself, right? I mean, they're having parties and inviting each other. Verse 11, but put forth your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. So the devil says, take the hand of protection you've got on him and the hand of blessing, remove that blessing and protection, and he says, this is what's gonna happen, God. This beloved, blameless, upright man that you think so highly of, Job, he's gonna curse you to your face. And look at what's happening here. I see 3 different things happening here. One, Satan knows people, doesn't he? He knows us. Because how many times do any of us, if we don't get what we're wanting or we lose what we wanted, if we don't have what we hoped for, if we lost what we once had, how many of us turn immediately to God and say, man, why'd you let this happen? Much as I'm praying and worshiping you and you're gonna treat me like this, he'll curse you to your face. Second thing I see happening is that's his goal. That's his goal. It's like he's going, come on, take it, because then he'll curse you to your face. You can only see the smile forming across the devil's face. He'll curse you to your face. Oh, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. You know what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? God, let him hear a question about you that he can't answer. Oh, and then he'll tell everyone that you don't even exist. The truth is, he's not smart enough to have an answer and find it in your words, and everyone else has to be told that you're not even real. He'll curse you to your face because he loves his own education. He loves his own intelligence. He loves how smart he is in his own eyes. And so if he can't have an answer, he'll convince himself that nobody's got an answer, and then he'll say, you know what, there is no God. Has that happened to anybody? What happens, God, if you were to take those kids that he prays for every day, and then he'll get angry and he'll shake his fist at you and say, I'm sick of this, God. I've worshiped you daily and weekly, and I've prayed for those kids. In fact, God, I prayed protection for those kids, and you took them? He'll surely curse you to your face. Here's the third thing I see. The devil says Job's going to do in public the very thing Job prayed for his sons about in private. God, even if they've sinned against you privately and in their heart, forgive them. Remember that? In their hearts. But now the devil says, take something from Job and he'll curse you in public. High-handed, that used to be referred to. He'll shake his hand at you and say, in public, God, I rebuke you. Not only did the devil think it was going to happen, he hoped it was going to happen. Let me ask you, has that happened to anybody in here? Maybe you're here just because somebody wanted you to be here. Maybe you were here because you were invited and you said, fine, I'll go. But in your mind, you're going, I'm not giving that guy praise. I'm not giving that guy any kind of worth or worthship. I'm not going to worship him for who he is. I'm just going to convince myself he's not here. What did he take from you? What did he take from you? Something you cared about? Verse 13, now the day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job. So the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans attacked and took them. The Sabaeans were a group in modern day Yemen, and they would have come from the south to come up to attack. It says the Sabaeans attacked and took them. They also slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. I mean, as soon as that guy finishes saying, you've lost all of that, verse 16, while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. The fire of God was the way they would have referred to lightning. Bah, bah, bah. So a storm, and the storms would have come from the west. They would have come in, blowing across, and you could have seen them coming. And so the storms and the lightning and striking and setting things on fire. And so this big, powerful storm to where they say, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. That alone would have been enough. As soon as he finishes, next verse, while he was still speaking, another also came and said the Chaldeans. And here's the thing, the Chaldeans were the early neon Babylonians, like the precursors to the Babylonians, to Babylon. They would have come from the north. It says the Chaldeans formed 3 bands and made a raid on the camels and took them. There they go. There's the camels. Took the camels. Formed 3 bands and made a raid on the camels and took them and slew the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to take. The 3 bands thing is a very popular way that early military would have attacked in those days. This is like, you're looking at around 9th or even 10th centuries BC, where they would have come in and they'd have formed 3 groups, and they'd have attacked from 3 different angles, like a triangle. And that way, if you'd have tried to run one way, they come at you. If you try to run the other way, now they're behind you, and so they've got you from both sides and even a 3rd angle. So they would form 3 bands. So it's pretty cool, the historicity there. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Verse 18, while he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they died. And I alone have escaped to tell you. And that wind is common. It would have come from the east. So what Job heard in this is he would have heard they came from the north. The Chaldeans, they came from the south. They came from the west. And it came from the east. Everything Job had was surrounded on all sides from heaven and earth. He would have seen this as everyone and everything against him, taking everything he cared about. It came from the north and the south and the east and the west. His kids were killed. All he had, and at this moment, this person that at one point had great wealth and would have been identified as that great man who is very wealthy. Let me ask you, how do people see you? Because here's the problem. What we tend to do is we tend to identify ourselves with what we have. And for some people, you identify yourself with your education. And everywhere you go, you got to tell somebody what degree you've got or what school you went to. You identify yourself with where you went or what you've learned. And it happens even in pastoral circles. I'll say hey to someone who's also a pastor. Oh, what seminary did you go to? Like, this is this little circle. What seminary did you go to? Let me see that ring. Let me see the ring finger. Which seminary? And for some people, we identify ourselves with our possessions. With our children, we'll say, hey, my name is, and I've got this number of children. And then our children become our identity. Or maybe it's your wealth. Hey, my name is, and I own these many companies. We tend to identify ourselves with our possessions. And listen, if your possessions identify your life, your possessions are more important than your life. And the example of that is suicide. When so many people lose what they have, they lose all will to live. And you hear of stockbrokers worth millions. They lose it all and they jump off a building. You see a wife who identified herself with her husband, and then when he's gone, she has no desire to go on. Or someone who identifies himself with their children, and when they're gone, they can't get past it, and they shake their fist at God. If your possessions become equal to your life, then your possessions are greater than your life. And I got to tell you, as a dad, if I were in Job's position, I would be devastated. Not just for the loss of my kids, but that I couldn't have been there to be their hero. I mean, what dad doesn't like that? To be the one that rescues and can be the hero and come swooping in with the Superman cape, and they go, yeah, Daddy, you can do it, you're strong. That's right, kids. Right? Because we want to be the hero. You know why we want to be the hero? Because it makes us feel powerful. It makes us feel powerful when people are looking at us. And some dads love being the hero so much, they'll even try to rescue and save those who don't even belong to them. They'll want to be the one that is the provider and the giver and seen as the one receiving the credit, because some men trip on power more than anything else. It speaks of a divine, gigantic, huge insecurity. See me as great. Because if you can have others see you as great, you can be seen as the hero, and you are looked at and seen as powerful. So I would have certainly struggled with that. And I would have said, God, I would have wanted to be there to be the hero, because then I can be strong and powerful in the eyes of my kids. Or at least I would have said, God, where were you? God, I'm losing everything I own. Lord, please be the hero. Swoop in and save this. Keep my possessions from going away. How will I get through another day? God, okay, God, this is your time to act. This is your time to be my personal savior, hero, Superman, for you to swoop in and make the bad things stop. God, okay, here's the chance. I've been worshiping and praying and saying, God, protect and forgive my kids. Now that they're being attacked, God, swoop in and save, swoop in and be the hero. Because listen, if we can't be the hero, we at least want to have one. Because being a hero makes us feel powerful. Having a hero makes us feel secure. But see, here's the problem. God doesn't follow our script. And when we pray that kind of prayer, God, swoop in and don't let this happen. God, swoop in and save. Don't let this happen. We're more concerned about what we have than who God is. So he loses everything. From the north and the south and the east and the west, from the earth, from man, from God. How does Job respond? He says in verse 20, then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell to the ground and worshiped. I would have fallen to the ground and wanted to die. I would have fallen to the ground and gotten angry. I may have even accused God to his face. God, this guy asked me some questions and I can't come up with the answer. It looks like you must not be real. I'm really mad at you, so therefore you're not. God, my family was taken from me, and I loved my family deeply, and you took the thing that I loved the most. Therefore, I don't love you anymore. God, you took the very thing that everyone knew me by. The job that everyone knew me by, the title that everyone knew me by, you stripped it away. Now I'm nothing. How many of us would have fallen to the ground and said, God, I love you, even though you took my family and my kids and my possessions and my home? This answers the question, church, how do we respond in loss? He fell to the ground and worshiped. Verse 21, he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And through all this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. Job understood right there in that moment. I came here with nothing. I came here with no title, no job, no money, naked from my mother's womb, no education, no wisdom, no possessions, no children, no spouse, no nothing. And that's the same way I'm going to go back. A couple times in the last, 6 or 7 months, I've been invited to speak at this maximum security prison, and I've been real thankful for it, for the experience, for the opportunity, for the people I've met. A couple of the guys have begun to write me from prison, and I write them back. But I also met a guy there that I was really touched by, and his name's Bobby. And I met he and his wife, and Bobby's got an amazing story. And I saw Bobby up there. I was bringing the message, and he was going to bring the music and the worship, and he began to just share his story with all the inmates there. And he said something that caught me. He said, see, I was an inmate. He said, I was in here just like you. He said, but God came in and changed my life. And now what Bobby and his wife do is they travel the country, and they lead people who are far from God to know about the love of God. And as soon as I began to work on this series, I thought, man, I'd love to hear if we could get Bobby and his wife to come be a part of today, just the launch of this series. And so I asked him if he would, and he said yes. And so his wife and he are here, and they're going to lead us in a song that when he sang it in front of this crowd of, 100 inmates, most of whom will never see freedom again inside the prison walls, I watched as they sat there and just wept. So what I'd like you to do is consider the same thing. As he leads us, he and his wife, maybe you consider where it is God's brought you from.
I was thinking about the times in my life that the enemy has been the accuser. And, there's been times in my life when, after being saved, that I willingly turned my back on God. And it wasn't that I was an innocent victim. It's just that I chose to follow my flesh more than I chose to be obedient and follow my Savior. And in those times, I ended up falling flat on my face again. And Luke 15 is one of my favorite parables. And it's a parable of the lost sheep. And it says, who of you having 100 sheep wouldn't leave the 99 and go after that one that was lost? And when you found him, instead of giving him what he deserved, the Bible says that he picked him up and took him back rejoicing, saying that one that was lost I found. And I found that to be true in my life, certainly before I was saved, but even after being saved. And getting before God and ending up stumbling and falling, he sought me and came back, and instead of condemning me, showed me grace and mercy. And so as a songwriter, I wrote a song, and it's called One in the 99. Well, I am one of the 99 that my Father didn't leave behind. He came and found me when I'd lost my way. In the shadow of his wings I find rest, blessed peace and righteousness. Said this heart of stone got turned to a heart of flesh. I studied his word, and as I grew, It wasn't long before I knew that He'd called me to proclaim His mighty word. So I stand up straight and I toe the line, 'cause I'm one of the 99, and I'll serve Him till my dying day. The good Lord is my shepherd. He's been there time after time, with mercy and forgiveness, 'cause I'm one of the 99. The pestilence, the guilt, and the scorn, still standing here and my sails are torn, but I'm a soldier and I'm never giving in. If fight we must, then fight we do. The weapons of God are tried and true, and the war's been fought and we stand in victory. The good Lord is my shepherd. He's been there time after time, with mercy and forgiveness, 'cause I'm one of the 99. One of the 99. One of the 99. Amen.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. This is what I'd like to do. Maybe you're in here as a guest or someone you feel like you're far from God, and you're wondering, can God love or forgive or look past or look through or look beyond or maybe even around what it is that you've got going on in your life, or what you've done with your life, or how you've responded whenever you felt the pressure of life. Job lost everything. Everything. Instead of shaking his fist in anger and deciding that there was no God, or shaking his fist in anger and saying, if you're real or not, I don't care, I'm walking out of here. Job instead said he fell to his face and worshiped and said, naked I came, naked I'll return. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away, but blessed be the name of the Lord. So what I want to do is open up a time of invitation. Maybe you're someone that knows you need to come forward and say, God, forgive me, I'm sorry. And then watch, because he does. He just wants to know that you're wanting His forgiveness and that you're wanting to fall and worship. I've experienced it. And I came back to God. And we got another example of someone who experienced it and came to God, and we saw a video in the beginning about a guy who experienced it and came to God. So if you're sitting here going, okay, well, what do you want me to do, Brian? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to get out of the pew. I'm going to pray. We're going to have people down here up front at the altar, and you come forward and say, what do I have to do to give my life to Christ? Go up to one of the ones who are standing here and just ask them that. I want to know that I'm going to heaven. I want to know that I'm saved. I want to come back. I've been one of the ones who was gone, and I want to come back to God. How do I do that? I want to know what it means to be a part of this congregation. I want to know, what do I have to do to get baptized? Whatever your question might be, don't just sit there and wonder it. Come forward. Come forward, and then watch how God responds. Watch how He responds when you turn back to Him.